Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Katie Earlam. I'm the Managing Director at 72 Point, and we're absolutely delighted today to be talking to you about our new project, Human Voices. This is about the power of case studies. So as we're all living in a world where audiences are being inundated with content from all different areas, we're seeing a lot more AI-generated content, and as a result, losing potentially some of the human voice. Today is about the fact that we'd like to talk about how important it still is in the media ecosystem and where it suits. And we're going to be joined by some fantastic guests who are going to be able to talk us through that. So we are going to talk about generally the value of human voices, how to source them, and safely do it through the right places. And we're also going to talk through a real campaign example of where it worked, and we can prove the value of that as well, and impact for brands. And without further ado, I suppose it's time to introduce our panel. So first of all, we've got Rebecca Willey from Skipton, who is the head of PR there. We have Alex Goss, who's joining us remotely from the Sun newsroom, head of news, and our very own Laura Elvin, head of news at SWNS. So without further ado, Alex, I will hand over to you to talk us through the value of case studies.
Hello, welcome everybody on what finally feels like a spring-like morning, which is very appropriate as we face a new dawn of AI and come out of our rainy winter. From a newsroom perspective, no one is in any doubt that it's an absolutely transformative tool, and this is across the whole of society. What's going to be fascinating is the path it takes. And I think what we have to remember from an editorial perspective is that AI is a production tool. It is not a replacement for real journalists. And it's exactly the same in the workplace. To put it in perspective, so in our new rhythm of our morning in the newsroom, our news inbox, obviously, which is a receptacle for the majority of our first contact press releases, things that come in on spec, will probably get, there's become a window now between 8 and 10, where I will get 300 to 400 press releases, all on a Rolodeck, essentially, which you can spot immediately are simple ChatGPT copy and paste fakes, essentially. There's no research behind it. There are no humans behind it. And it's actually being sent by robots as well, who are using generic avatars. And the biggest clue, obviously, there's no phone number, there's no humans to talk to. So that end of it, you'll be unsurprised to know, none of it cuts through, because none of it involves a real human. And the great challenge for making money in a post-print world for news publishers has been, of course, how do you secure volume traffic? How do you secure sustainable revenue? Well, actually, it turns out, if you look at how we're heading towards Google Zero, if you look at the impact those changes in search and social have had, rather than that kind of news you can use, hybrid local paper lifestyle stuff, it's actually coming back to real original human content. Because what can't AI do? AI can't knock on a door. AI can't go to a council meeting. AI can't console someone or offer a fitting tribute or do any investigation. And people want to read human stories about real human people. So I think we've already seen it, demonstrably so, that the more human interest stories we do at any level, be they local or national, that's the one that gets the engagement. That's the stuff that people want to read and we get the feedback from. And I'm sure lots of you have had the same thing. There's nothing I hate more. I get an email in and then I reply to someone, however short it may be, and they send me an auto reply, a Google auto reply. You can spot it a mile off. Many thanks, so-and-so, and they sign it off with whatever it is. Just send me an emoji. Do me a couple of whatevers. Take a bit of human time to answer it, but just mugging me off with an automatic button. That just, you've got a place where robots are reading the emails and replying to the emails. It's just robots talking to robots. You've taken the human out of the equation. And that's why, from a story perspective at our end, AI is a fantastic production tool for broader research, but you've got to look at it like a giant Wikipedia or Google. And actually, you use it with the same circumspect as you would do any of those other tools. All of our content still has to be verified independently, multiply sourced and checked. So although the visual challenge is there now with what people can create, it still comes back to we need to know who's in that story and where it's come from, or we can't vouch for it and publish it, which is why with Southwest News and 72 Point, the great work they do, it goes beyond the simple data research. they are connected enough with the regions, with that lifeblood, which is local journalism. And that's where all the great national and international stories start. It's those stories in your community from real people. And at the Sun, it's where 95% of our exclusives still come from. They still come from ring-ins, readers, proper people talking to us. They've seen something they want to tell us about. And it's the same with terms of press releases or news stories that come via somewhere like 72 Point. It's because they've got human contact. They know what a story is and it involves real humans. That's what gets the engagement and interests our readers. So I think while AI is a terrifying prospect in many ways, it's an opportunity to free up journalists to do journalism, and likewise from a marketing and PR perspective, hopefully it frees you up to actually focus on the human elements of your business and your story and give you the productivity boost you need to reach a bigger audience more precisely, but just with simple human stories. I think that's the key to it, really, from our perspective. And I know Katie and the team do a fantastic job at that.
Alex, obviously we've seen the Press Gazette, investigation into the amount of fake content, fake experts that we've seen, an incredible investigation by them. Is there any specific detail that stands out for you that you just know that is not real?
I mean, it's just you just know it's not human. The first thing is the formatting, obviously, because it's generic. The language is generic, obviously, because AI is exactly that. Remember, AI is not doing anything new. It's a giant memory bank taking a snapshot of what was out there and then using gradient descent and all those other techniques. It's a probability guesser. It's just thinking of all those weighted tokens and probabilities. What's the most likely answer? It's guesswork. Hence, it does the fantasy stuff where it hallucinates so vividly and so precisely. So look, it's like Wikipedia. And in terms of the spots, the obvious ones, the real clues are, first of all, it will be generic name at genericnamepr.com, which oftentimes doesn't exist. The content will be formatted in an exact chat GTP way. And the content will be pretty meaningless. You can tell it's come from a single word prompt. Now, don't get me wrong, on the other side of it, the whole purpose of selling a news story is saying it in a sentence, saying it in a clear headline. The lesson we tell everybody, and this goes back to the Southwest News Days or any level of journalism, can you say in a sentence? Can you sell your story in such a fashion that someone understands it? Because people at every level, they're so entwined and engaged in an issue that's happened to them. They start at the end and then they tell you something in the middle and whichever. But actually, the art of journalism, the art of distilling a public message is saying it succinctly with the most engaging facts. And you should be able to do that in 25 words max. And if you can't do it in 25 words, then you need to think about, right, there's something I can't explain here, or I've not got to the succinct nub of what it means. AI, on the other hand, you've got someone asking a generic prompt, go and give me some information on this factor or this issue. And AI churns out the most likely probable answer of something that's already out there. So it continues that algorithm echo chamber, which you have with Twitter and Facebook and everywhere else. And in fact, now people's own WhatsApp groups, which have become their own silos in local communities. So yeah, you can spot it a mile off. Most of them are immediately spiked or blocked by our spam filters because it's just a waste of electricity and water, in all honesty. So as I say, I understand that as a helpful production and subbing tool, great, but using them for original ideas and content, it's a bit of a non-starter in whole, because we could just do that ourselves. If we wanted to fill something up with pretty meaningless, vacuous messages, we could just type some prompts in. But no one will buy the paper and no one will click on the website because they've read it all before and it'd all be boring.
And presumably it causes quite a lot of frustration as, resources are down across journalism. It feels like there's been a bit of an opportunity there for people that they've taken it and really been quite juiced about the way that they've done it.
Honestly, for me, it's having done this job for 10 years now, and I've always accepted I'm incredibly lucky to be here. Someone that's got the resources to do real journalism, send people on doorsteps, hold people to account and do what we should be doing for the fifth estate. I thought what was going to be the real death of traditional journalism was going to be SEO, search, social. So much energy in a newsroom had to be devoted to volume traffic because, of course, everyone thought that was the way it was going to go. So all those stories which says, how do I clean my car windscreen with a lemon? What time's the game on, etc. Actually, like the end of Private Ryan, that tank that was going to run us over now has just been blown apart by AI. All of that can be instantly answered. As I said before, Google AI is already doing it, those AI answers. I'm not saying they're accurate or they're a solution, but it means you don't have to click through anymore. Now, yes, this represents a a seismic change for internet publishing. Ourselves have been hit by exactly the same impact. But on the other side of it, it comes back to, again, the intrinsic value of real journalists and real journalism. And that is what people want to read and engage with. And that's why it's not just about a one-take story now, but all of our stories now we do across different formats. So there'll be a story in the printed edition, but we might break off a version of it for some club, our subscribers. We've then got video. We've done long-form videos. I was a producer on our award-winning Maddie documentary last year, which started as a straightforward news investigation for 8 months. And then in a month, we turned it round on video, have that edited, then publish it across every platform we do, from YouTube to Channel 4. And that comes back to sending a reporter to Germany to cover a real story, who talks to another human, he uncovers some fantastic information. That's the circle of journalism life, which is what it was, obviously, when the Sun was founded, and goes back as far as, journalism existed. So actually, if AI takes away the drudgery and the legwork of CMS and content production, great. It can never obviously create original content. As a subbing tool, perhaps it can be useful, but no much more so than a spell check should be. The rest of it comes back to, thank God, original journalism and real people and face-to-face conversations.
So that brings us on to Laura to talk about how we source those case studies. So Alex has obviously clearly identified the need for original content and what we need. How do you go about finding us original case studies, ones that are real, and using your journalistic talents to source them?
Yeah, thanks, Alex, and thanks, Katie. My name's Laura Elvin. I'm head of news at SWNS, and we work with 72 Point to deliver the case study products for their clients. And I'm going to take you a little bit through how we go about doing that. I think probably a good place to start would be kind of the biggest myth around sourcing case studies. I think people think it's as simple as putting out a message on Twitter or LinkedIn and getting some replies and then sending it on to somebody that's going to use it. Realistically, that's not what happens, and there's a long and thorough process that we go through to ensure that the case studies that we produce are suitable for 72 Points clients, and more importantly, going to get the cut through so that when they land in Alex's inbox alongside maybe the 300 other things, that it's usable, it's authentic, it looks like it's real and doesn't fall into some of the pitfalls that Alex outlined there. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of the process of how we go about doing those. I think people think it's a bit of a mystery, so hopefully I'll be able to demystify some of those areas about how we go about sourcing them. So we start with really nailing the brief, and 72 Points creatives are really good at helping us with that. And what they'll do is define exactly the case study that their clients want to very detailed, and maybe it'll be the client wants a particular kind of person. They want them to convey a particular kind of message, or they want to have a very specific experience. So the first step of the case study sourcing process is really nailing that so that everybody's happy with it. And of course, we give our feedback into that as well, to make sure that it's something that we realistically can find. And then the next part of it is actually sourcing that case study. So that's the biggest bit of work for us. And what that involves is a lot of different techniques that we use to find those case studies. They can be broadly summed up by, we use the exact same techniques that we do for finding stories for the Mail, the Telegraph, the Times, the Sun, Lad Bible, the New York Post. We deploy those exact same techniques to finding the case studies for these stories as well. So by, working with us, it allows you to tap into that. There's lots of different ways that we use to source them. We have a GDPR compliant network of 50,000 people that have already said that they want to be contacted for these opportunities. We also have a point and shoot team that, when we want to find a particular story, whether that's for this case study product or for our newswire that goes out to all the biggest publications in the world every day, we use that same point and shoot team that we can deploy on these sorts of case study projects as well. We have a regional network of journalists across the country and photographers that we can deploy to find them. And those are that probably outlines the main ways that we source these case studies. I think that what I'd like to make clear is that we don't just find that one person and then send that back to the clients or to 72 Point. We'll make sure that we source on volume so that we can then pick and choose the ones that fit that exact brief that's come to us. So we're not just going to find, this one will do. It kind of fits the brief. What we'll do is we'll source until we find the exact one that's required by 72 Point and their clients. And then the next step is the most important one. And Katie touched on it earlier. It's the verification stage. I think that we want to see ourselves as that antidote to those AI fake case studies that Press Gazette have done such a good job of investigating. And that means that we have to verify the identity and the consistency of the case study exactly with the same techniques and nous that we would use when we were verifying stories for our own newswire when they go out to our clients. So we ask all the questions that journalists are going to ask when that case study lands in their inbox, and we ask them first to make sure that they pass they pass that very high bar that we and 72 Point and our clients set. And we do that through a variety of means, but some of those are like an agreement between us and the contributor, the case study, that we both sign that says that that it's completely verified and true and accurate. We actually interview them. And like Alex says, that good old-fashioned journalism, that's what we pride ourselves on. We don't take stories over email. It's really easy to fake things on email. We actually have conversations with real people to verify that what they're saying is coming from a real person and a real human voice. And then we use all the techniques that we would usually use to verify whether stories are right. There's a visual verification stage that we use for all of our case studies. And then there's just that old-fashioned sixth sense that journalists have. We've got an inbuilt sort of BS detector that we deploy for this, as well as all of our other stories. And that means that when we're presenting that case study back to 72 Point for them to present back to the client, it passes that extremely high bar that we hold for all of our journalism. And then the next element is making sure that the case study knows what's expected for them. Do they know what's going to happen next? Are they comfortable with that? And I think this is really important when it comes to those very sensitive case studies, which we're like really good at sourcing and we've done for Skipton on a number of occasions, which we'll hear about in a minute. The more sensitive the case study, the greater care that we need to take in that area. And that's a really important step that we build into our process. And then the next stage is making sure that that is presented back to 72 Point and the client, ready to be used, packaged for media. It's written like all of our other page-ready copy that's ready to be used by newsrooms like The Sun, as they often do, with those really strong quotes, that really clear context, the hooks there, the headline works, it's got the quotes that the publications need to use that case study. And it's presented like a real human. It doesn't sound like it's been written by AI because it's not written by AI. It's written by a real journalist that day will have worked on copy for the Mail, for the Sun, for the Times. And this is another one that they do, and it's written in exactly the same way that stops it looking like AI when it lands in boxes like Alex's. So that's kind of like our usual process. Some of the pitfalls that we kind of keep in mind and that make this such a useful tool for people to use, and that I guess I would want people to take away if they were thinking about case studies, is just that verification element being really important, so that you don't fall foul of those investigations that Press Gazette have done. And also that being generic and that over editing that sometimes comes from PR stories, not ours, I'm proud to say, is that where it sounds like it's come from a PR, it sounds like it's come from an AI bot, it hasn't. And I think that case studies are a really good way of injecting that into stories to make sure that they land and they get the coverage that everybody wants.
Amazing. And I suppose take AI out of it for a little bit. I suppose PRs have been used to putting something out on Response Source or going on X and saying, does anybody know anybody, or using their own sources. This really is quite a unique method for a PR agency to have access to, isn't it, in terms of boots on the ground, old-fashioned shoe leather, what's going on in that sense? This is really quite unusual in the PR space.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, please get in touch. Maybe you can put it in your questions. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody else doing it like this, where it's journalists who are doing this day in and day out for publications around the world, like using the exact same techniques and tools to deliver that service for a PR agency. I haven't heard anybody else doing it.
Rebecca, I don't know if you've ever sort of used anyone else previously that's sort of given us any indication of how they source it or what they do, but it feels it's always been quite surface level from my own experience in previous agencies, where we just sort of, it's a bit of luck if you're going to get one or not.
Oh, absolutely that. So we've used the techniques you've mentioned. We've put requests out on X. We've used response source, but actually it's the speed of getting the case done, all the fact checking, all the verification, making sure they're interviewed in the right way, and working with yourselves has enabled us to do that and make sure we've producing trusted content for journalists, and it's really helped our processes.
Yeah, we don't just leave it to luck. And I'm happy to say, touch wood, we haven't failed on a case study brief yet, and we've had some very, very, very challenging ones. So, yeah, I don't want to lose that streak anytime soon.
Yeah, I know that we've definitely sent some your way that have been definitely on the more challenging side. So we're very grateful. But that's a great time for me to bring you in, Rebecca, and talk about sort of the live campaign examples that we've had and that we've worked together on to be able to bring your stories to life.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi everyone, I'm Rebecca. I lead the PR team at Skipton Building Society. Human voices are so important to us because they're at the heart of our business. Our business is member-owned, so our customers are our members. So it's really important that those human voices, we understand them, we hear them, and that we elevate them as well so that we can help others. Skipton Building Society's purpose is to help more people into homes, help people plan for their life ahead, and help their money work harder. And we can't do that without championing real lived experiences and making financial topics relatable for others. When I came to the podcast today, I was reflecting on kind of what is the content that really resonates with me and has a lasting impact. And it led me to think about films. I think films, for me, when they're based on a true story, hit differently. They're the ones I think about years later. And I think they're the ones that there's nothing lands better than a real human story that's told by the person who's lived the experience. And I think that's really key for us at Skipton when we look at our PR campaigns, because we know that data plays an important part, but it's the human angle that can really bring the relevance to life. Now, as mentioned, working in financial services, you've heard the word data a lot. We have a lot of it. It can get complex, it can get complicated, it can get dry when you talk about financial services. So we want to make sure that we bring in the relevance and relatability of the experiences that people face day to day, because they're not living in facts and figures, they're living in questions. Am I going to get any money from the bank of mum and dad so I can move out? Am I going to be stuck living with my parents? Or am I even going to be able to retire before I'm 65? These are the scenarios and questions that people are asking themselves on a regular basis. Laura and I, we chatted about this earlier and talked about how it's really important that somebody can explain it to you in an authentic and credible way, but take away the complex. And I think real lived experiences that bring in the nuances, the emotion, and the hope and determination of getting onto things like the property ladder really click with people and make the campaigns that we deliver stay with them much longer. It's really important to bring truth and texture and a rich tapestry to what we do with our campaigns. And we're really fortunate at Skipton. We have some brilliant, credible experts who can speak with authority and take complex issues and make them relatable. But it's what it feels like, I think, that is the biggest difference. So what it feels like when it's happening to you. And Alex has shared some of the great evidence of where AI, yes, it can create slick copy, but it can't create that lived, true meaningful experience. And that's what human voices and why they're really important to us at Skipton. So some of you might not be aware, but Skipton Building Society is part of a larger group called Skipton Group. And within that group, we've got a network of the UK's largest estate agencies, 80 brands that help us deliver 1 in 10 transactions on the high street. Through that, we've got this rich data that shows a real accurate picture across the UK of affordability, because we can see it from a housing perspective through our estate agencies, and we can see it through the mortgage market as well. So we can paint this technical, accurate picture. But what does this mean for someone trying to get onto the property ladder today? So our research told us that 98% of people can't afford a home in the area that they live in. That's quite a stark and shocking statistic, especially if you're one of the people who are currently stuck in the rental cycle or living with your mum and dad and you're ready to move out. So this led us to look at all this data that we have and these great stats and work with 72 Point to find a way to bring it to life. We could tell you through the data the top 10 most affordable areas in the UK. It's quite surprising, they're not always where you expect. And also the worst affordable across the UK as well. And 72 Point helped us source case studies across the regions so we could bring real stories from each individual town where these people were facing difficulties getting onto the property ladder and looking at where the real barriers were. To do this, though, we needed to make sure, as Laura said, that these case studies were verified and that they were emotional, honest case studies. Working with 72 Point enabled us to have the editorial rigour, the safeguarding and the verification. We found the process enabled us to have real, relatable stories that match the data. This pairing of data and lived experience drove huge media impact for us across broadcast and online. An example of one of the cases that we used, and this is something that we use human voices and cases across all of our campaigns, because we've got some fantastic products and services that can help real-world situations. What we want to position them to enable us to position the case studies, to tell the story of how these products and services can make a difference in these people's lives, to help and inspire others. So one case we worked with to pull out for our track record mortgage. So our track record mortgage is 100% mortgage, which enables people to get onto the property ladder if they're renting without the need of deposit. Increasing rents and increasing bills make it difficult for many renters to save, making them trapped in the rental cycle, whilst also fearing that they won't be able to get out of it because of increasing rents. We did some research with 72 Point where we looked at males versus females when it comes to wanting to buy on your own. And what was disappointing is many women felt the first step to the property ladder was by having a partner. Now, that doesn't have to be the case. So we worked with 72 Point to find a great female case study of somebody who was doing it themselves, who made some sacrifices, did their research, found some great products like Skipton's 100% track record mortgage, and enabled them to get onto the property ladder. She represented a difference in the data. Whilst the data was showing a difficulty, here was someone who was providing hope and inspiration to others by sharing her real life experience. Not only that, she'd bought a property that needed renovating, and she was going through and doing it in budgeting and IKEA hacks and all these other ways to enable her to have the best house, even though she bought the worst one on the street. And I think this is where we get the great cut through from the media, because it's stories like that that make the financial services data more interesting. It's relatable, it's relevant, it provides that hope. The key, and I think Laura touched on this earlier, is about not being polished, letting the case studies speak for themselves, and then the journalist will automatically feel the authenticity that comes with the case study. Real quotes, real struggles, real determination. It's the human truth behind the data that matters. Like Laura said, it's around the fact-checking and reducing that newsroom friction. So working with 72 Point, we've been able to create packages that are ready to lift for the media to use in an instant, with lots of quotes, content in terms of photography, and research packaged all together, and even some video content too, that enables newsrooms to take it, use it, syndicate it, and that's always delivered high numbers of success for us in our campaigns. The key for us, though, is that trust and establishing that boundaries for the case studies. We want to be a responsible storyteller. That is vital to us, that we're ethical and reputational impact on our business. We want to make sure that we can really put boundaries in place, and working with 72 Points enabled us to do that and build that trust with our journalists and our case studies, in that they'll be represented in the most trusted and authentic way. And that's really important to us when we work with our charity partners. So you might have seen an activation that we did with 72 Point, where we created a giant ice house, because we've got to be creative in how we deliver our content. So we wanted to bring to life the story of the rising costs of energy bills. So working with our charity partner, National Energy Action, we built a giant ice house to represent thousands of people who were living and trapped in rising energy bills that was impacting their savings and their cost of living. We needed to find case studies to bring this ice house to life. So we worked with 72 Point to enable us to do that, to find those stories that were the most vulnerable and emotional, but yet we knew those case studies would be supported in the best way when delivering their story, and that you bring that inspiration and hope to others. And we could also use it as a business to help drive our public affairs agenda and help others too. So my final takeaway is that human voices aren't the garnish. They're the glue of your campaigns. They're really important to have. They're what hold it together with the data. Data informs the stories, but it's actually the human voices who make that care. And this is how at Skipton we deliver on our purpose, by making it relevant and driving an impact with the people who matter to us most.
Rebecca, thank you so much. And those really were incredibly powerful campaigns that we worked together on. And we think, really do indicate from a case study perspective why that works. Alex liked them. You ran them at the Sun. So that brings us to our Q&A. And we've had a couple in already. So the first question that we've had, and Alex, probably one to you, but we sort of touched on it lightly, but what's the biggest mistake PR teams make when they send case studies to newsrooms?
I think the biggest mistake is sending things fully blind on spec. You guys have gone to incredibly hard work to support whatever your cause may be, and you've put all the yards in to pull those things together. But then it's fired blind into a generic inbox, which would have, I think there's 98,000 in there at the moment, which we battle through. We get through them all every day in some form, but the volume is so huge. What people must do is target where they're sending things. So look at your particular issue. Say, you're a charity sector, for example. What's your issue? Where are you campaigning? If it's a health issue, you need to get to know the health correspondent or the corresponding person, the lobby team that deals with the Department of Health. If you target your message and you target who you're going to, you will cut through and ahead of thousands of other generic press releases. And some may have very valid messages or stories, but they'll have zero impact because they've had no way to tune out the other noise and volume and cut through. So I think that's rule 101. And, it's exactly journalism from the other side of the coin. Pick up the phone, find out who the right person is, go for a coffee, meet them, have a chat, build that network of direct contacts. And the rest of it is very straightforward, because they can then give you an immediate answer why it doesn't work for them. You get invaluable feedback. You'll learn more about the news cycle, about what's a terrible time to do it and what's a brilliant time, obviously, in terms of the rhythm of the news day, but not just that, the rhythm of the news week, the rhythm of the news year, what other seismic news events are on that might knock things off its perch in terms of diary. Obviously, no one's in control of live events, but I think that's really important. Look at what your area, the sector you're covering, look at where you want to get your engagement, how you want to spread your message, and then accurately target it. As I say, people could put hours and hours and days and months into campaigns, and then they launch it blind by putting no effort or particularly targeted time into where they actually want it to appear and who they want to speak to. So I think for every pound invested in that, in terms of your time, will reap dividends in terms of rewards and productivity and ultimately the results you want to see.
I think that's really encouraging to hear the fact that you quite like a phone call and somebody giving you a call. And I suppose it is just hearing that voice that feels like another form of verification. We've heard this week that, sort of PR mentioned by Reach potentially about potential PRs being put on a list that means that they're going to be more accepted. I think those comments have since been clarified, but do you feel that way? Are you more sceptical, Alex, about sort of who you speak to, and therefore is the phone now a lot more valuable to you?
I mean, tragically, we're one of the last news desks, I think. Well, I can't vouch for everybody news desks, but certainly newsrooms where we've still got a bank of old school corded phones that we can pick up and hang up on, slam down or throw around the room, whatever we want to do, rather than hot desking or departments which just don't have numbers at all. And look, that opens us up to all sorts of other challenges, as it would do. But ultimately, it's that human communication. We can chat, we can find out much, much faster and simpler than any type stuff or email. Where you're from, what it's about, and most importantly, if we can be of any help to each other, essentially. Have you got a great story that could work for us today? And if not, we can let you know straight away. But as I say, I think you've got to target it, crucially, that's the point. Know who you want to speak to by doing some very simple investigation. Who's covering your patch, at what titles, what sort of stories are they into? what are the wider communication issues, what are on the news agenda at that time, and when's a good time to launch it. So I can understand how, as I said, if you've got one specific client or you're a specific charity with a certain cause, that is your all-consuming world, and people do some fantastic efforts to raise profiles. But you need to invest that time about where you're going to land it and with who. And from just a couple of phone calls and simple conversations, as I said, take someone for a coffee, whatever it may be, and then suddenly you've got proper engagement with someone. You can drop them a message, give them an advance heads up that something's coming under embargo, for example, and they can say, right, that's a great time, or actually this would be better for us, or is there a better line for us that could work that way? Obviously, it doesn't guarantee any coverage at all because it's still got to live on its own news merit, but at least you're in that feedback loop where you know if it's going to be, there's an obvious reason why it's not going to work, rather than firing it blindly into the dark and then, wondering why nothing ever appears. I think it's that simple step, thankfully, again, even in a post-AI world, is still the most important one.
Amazing. And whilst we've got you, Alex, it's just thought we'd cheekily ask if there's any case study trends that you're seeing, any particular stories that you'd like to hear from us that we can inform our clients about.
In terms of case study trends, I mean, again, to be honest, I'd say pick up the paper, really. I mean, obviously, royals, very much a hot topic, but obviously I won't delve into that for legal reasons. But look, in the broader world, what would you tell your friends about? What is the issue down the pub that's got people talking? That's real news stories. Obviously there's huge economic challenges facing the country. There's trade tariff turmoils, but everything trickles down to affect people on their doorstep and going about their daily lives. And I think that's the key: human stories that affect real people and that they can have empathy and sympathy with. And actually, with the huge and heartbreaking challenges local journalism has had, and bear in mind that grassroots level of journalism, yes, we've got multiple amazing formats, these incredible devices that you couldn't have thought. Old days, they were copy takers reading down a line from a phone box. That's how copy got filed. Now we've got incredible whiz-bang technology, and anyone can technically be a live citizen journalist of sorts, but a citizen journalist is realistically only the same as a tip or a ring-in, because they don't have the training or the ability necessarily, not to say they wouldn't one day, but to verify things as they had to be. We're bound by the IPSO code, obviously every law of the land and court, and hence we survive a Wikipedia era and all the others. Journalism still has to be verified. So I mean, there's lots of eyes and ears out there, but I think the breakdown happens where people now, they'll put it on TikTok before telling their local paper or their local MP or their local council, and that goes into its own algorithmic silos. Again, people are on community WhatsApp groups now. They're not even necessarily on Facebook WhatsApp groups. So you could have a market town of 30, 40,000 people, some incredible real human stories happening, and no one will know about it because no one is there to cover it at a local level. So in terms of the national websites now, if you look at the breadth of their coverage with what other might be slightly more local stories, they do incredibly well on some of the search traffic because there's a vacuum there now, which is very sad, and we'd like to do all we can to support local journalism, and that's still the lifeblood of democracy. But keeping the human at the centre of it all, and keep using the news you can use. That we need to get another generation engaged in content, and we'll do that by providing brilliant content. That's the important thing.
Well, another question that we've had come in, which I think probably is best to you, Rebecca. For organisations that are already rich in lived experience stories, where there isn't a need to source external case studies, what could internal comms teams be doing more to make better, more strategic use of those stories? Big question.
It's difficult. Well, there's two scenarios. So one, when we talk about kind of first-time buyers, these aren't yet our customers yet. So it's great to have 72 Point to help us find those. But when it's within our organisation, there's quite a lot that we do. So we work closely with our customer product teams to help them understand the kind of stories that we're looking for, so they can keep their ear to the ground and pull out anything of interest to us. And that's same with data points too. So we're getting both coming from those teams. We also have a members panel, so a customer panel that we can reach out to on a regular basis to try and ask for case studies there. And another tip that we do, so my third final tip would be actually use your workforce. The case studies, we're not bothered if and sometimes journalists don't need to mention where the the person works. If it works for the story and that they're actually authentic and credible and a relevant case study, regardless if they work at Skipton or not, we're still able to use them, and we've done that before. So we have our internal version of Facebook that we put out kind of requests to our workforce, because we've got quite a young workforce as well who are first-time buyers, so it's another place where we reach.
And sort of on the same level, this one comes to you as well. Are there any recent examples of case studies excuse me, that you've seen have had real impact and a strong call to action? I suppose the ones you just mentioned in the presentation.
I think, like you said, the ones that we've used recently for our charity stories, I think drive the biggest impact, because it's not about getting our brand in there with that story. It's about making sure that story drives an impact because of what we're trying to achieve with it and the objective of the story. So I think working with charity case studies, where actually we might only be a small part of that story, but we're achieving a bigger goal, I think they have the bigger cut through, because they're the ones who are the most real, honest and vulnerable, and offer the biggest levels of inspiration. And it's great, Alex talked about kind of TikTok and all the other social channels as well, because I think when we land great press coverage, we see the great hits that come back on TikTok and across other social channels, because real human voices drive talkability. So great campaigns and case studies, often we see them talked about on TikTok and in other social channels. And we've actually also found case studies on there that's just of interest, where people have actually talked about using our products and services to help them. So I think there's different ways that it can cut through, but it's worth also checking social.
Well, someone has written here, what are the key trends you foresee for 2026 across the industry? So, yeah, big question. I suppose we asked Alex about sort of what case studies are interesting, suggested reading the paper and just sort of seeing those. But from your guys' perspective, is there any other things that you see that might be of interest?
I think anything around personal finance. So I think that's hard to escape at the minute, whether you've got lots of money to spend or not. What people are thinking about, what people are spending their money on and what they're not spending their money on is a huge talking point for all the publications, because like Alex says, it's a huge talking point for society. So I think personal finance case studies are a great way of bringing those facts, those news stories to life with somebody who can provide that lived experience within that story that maybe brings facts or figures or something that's been passed in Parliament or statistics that's come out of a paper that brings that to life with a real life example of how that's played out through somebody's life. It's all very well saying, oh, it's really hard to get on the property ladder. It's a very different thing if that's coming from a brand. It's very different if it's coming from somebody who's like, this is my lived experience, these are the actual barriers that are stopping me doing that. And then from speaking to the hope element, this is how I overcame that, or how I haven't been able to overcome it. So yeah, personal finance is a really big case study area. I think travel is the other one. Those two things probably go hand in hand. I think people like a lot of escapism when there's that pressure on our finances, and showing ways to do that with less money, or just being that aspirational outlet, that case study led for travel. It looks beautiful, which is from a clickability point of view, from publications like The Sun, beautiful images are nice to look at. We like to read it. We like to escape in it or see how we might spend our, much needed 5 weeks off a year. And seeing other people doing that, those case studies, I think, so travel and personal finances are probably my favourite to source, and also the ones that I think get the biggest cut through and we'll see a lot more of.
Amazing. And Rebecca, any other trends that you've identified?
I would say 100% to what Laura's just said there, because if you look at the cost of living in general is having a huge impact on everyone at the moment, and it's not going away. Affordability challenges are going to be there to getting onto the property ladder. And I think case studies of, like we've talked about, Laura mentioned on there, hope and determination help, but also highlighting the real struggles and where brands can come in with their services, products and services to help make a difference, I think is a really rich way to make sure that you position your brand with case studies. And I think that's quite a growing trend in driving narrative in that solution mode.
I think that's echoed, isn't it, by the fact that we're seeing brands putting out job ads for storytellers, and that we're seeing a trend in that brands are really, I think the Times reported 3,000 job ads in the UK at the moment for those types of jobs within brands in-house to talk about that, because there's a real time for emotion. And that's something AI can't do. It can't put emotion in it. It can't talk to us all about how we really feel or how to really digest some of those more tricky situations. I think as we come to the end of it, first of all, thank you all so much for joining us today. Alex, thank you for joining us from the Sun newsroom. Rebecca, thank you for joining us and coming down from Skipton. And Laura as well, and talking us through the entire sourcing process. It's been really fascinating. And I think we can all agree that human voices are having a moment. The case studies are a real entry point into be able to build that emotion and you know, talk about a brand in a way that's going to resonate and in a way that publishers are going to be interested in. It's not the time for further AI slop to add to the dump of it. We're bored of it and we want to hear more. So thank you all again for joining us. It's been really powerful to hear some of those stories today. And please do talk to us about your case study needs. As we said, we are uniquely available to be able to find those case studies. It's a unique position that 72 Point has with the relationship with SWNS. And we can see from Rebecca that they've really, really worked to bring your brand to life. So thank you all so much and get in touch.